It's a quarter to 4, Jazz Radio 94.1 FM. And speaking of very talented Australian singers, Maggie Britton is an international recording artist with top 10 records in the UK, Europe, Australia and also New Zealand. And she also has wonderful songwriting talent, and her expertise have taken her throughout the world and also, of course, throughout Australia. And Maggie's in the studio right now. Maggie, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me in again, John. It's wonderful.
You started on Bandstand many years ago. Tell us how your career actually got started.
Well, I always wanted to sing, and I always did sing. And I was very fortunate in having some terrific jazz musicians. I was born in Geelong, and some really good musicians there who sort of took me under their wing when I was in my mid-teens. And so that kind of gave me a bit of inspiration and a bit of confidence as well. But the big thing in those days was Bandstand. And Bandstand was made in Sydney. So I had to, as soon as I was old enough to leave home, I think I was probably 17 and a half or something, off I went to Sydney with the aim of getting on Bandstand. And it really was. I mean, it was the huge program. Everyone used to, Saturday night, 6:30, everyone was watching Bandstand. So that was really how it began.
Yeah, Brian Henderson was a huge celebrity at the time, and it was a great showcase for Australian talent, wasn't it?
It really was. I mean, some marvellous talent on it, and I'm still friends with many of the girls that were on Bandstand in those days, like Janice Slater. We're good friends, and there's quite a few other girls that were on the show that I'm friends with. Judy Stone, for example.
Yeah, well, you had a big hit in New Zealand called Come On Down.
Well, that was a song that came out of America that my manager, whom I later married, and he was also a record producer. He managed Dinah Lee and Eden Kane and also some of the big New Zealand artists. He produced that record, and we went to New Zealand. I was going on tour, and the record just took off. And it was a fantastic experience. And I'll tell you who played on that as well. Horry Dargie.
Yeah.
Do you remember Horry Dargie?
Horry Dargie and the Quintet, very popular in those days.
My father was so thrilled because he loved Horry Dargie, and to think that Horry Dargie had played on my first record I went up in my father's estimations.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I guess that must have led to you looking for fame and fortune overseas, because you did travel overseas shortly after all that.
Exactly. And first off in America, but I felt very uncomfortable there. It was such a culture shock to me, and I always preferred London. And so I went on to London and then came back actually just to decide what to do, continued to work here in Australia and do television, and then went back a second time, got offered a deal from United Artists in Los Angeles, but I still couldn't find myself living there, so they said I could go to London, which is what I did. But I'll tell you another interesting thing. At the same time, and in hindsight, it just came to me, I was offered a contract by Reprise. Wouldn't that have been interesting had I gone with Reprise, who was like Frank Sinatra, and a lot of the big jazz artists were on Reprise. But I didn't. I went with United Artists.
It's good to have lots of options, though, anyway. And there were great days there in London. I guess this was around the 60s, was it? Yeah,
about 68, 69. It was a very exciting time. Carnaby Street, and it was the happening place, especially for young artists. It was just amazing. I loved it.
Yeah, and we've talked before about some of these musicians who used to appear in different bands, and they were in the top 10 with various different bands during that.
I think we might have spoken about it, you and I, once before, about Tony Burrows, who is the only person I know who was singing on 8 of the top 10 records in the UK all at the one time, under different names.
Yeah, it was quite remarkable.
Wasn't he ever?
I was over there at the time, back in the late 60s, early 70s. I think one of them was the old classic pop hit, Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes.
Yes, and that was written by my very dear friend, Barry Mason.
Ah, yeah. Well, he wrote lots of hits in that time.
Yeah, we're still friends to this day.
It's 9 to 4. We're talking to Maggie Britton, one of our great Australian singers. Now, over the years, you've performed with some wonderful entertainers, and just looking through this list here, people like the Bee Gees and Peter Sellers and Glen Campbell. Tell us about performing with some of these people. It must be a really wonderful experience performing with them.
It was, and I was very starstruck, always had been very starstruck, and I would never be the one to go and speak to them. I always waited till they spoke to me. And someone who was so kind was Peter Sellers.
Really?
Just fantastic. He insisted that he come to me, that he put me forward, that we had our photographs taken, which got a lot of press, as you can imagine, right around the world. So he was a lovely person, really enjoyed working with him, and I love seeing his movies because it reminds me of how nice he was.
Yeah, he was just an incredibly talented man.
Genius.
Yeah. Now, you actually got to perform at Drury Lane in the Royal Command performance.
Yes.
That must have been absolutely incredible.
It was. And I performed songs that I'd written myself, and to hear them played with an orchestra was fantastic because I'd recorded them with my own group. But when you hear a big orchestra playing something you've written, it's a mighty experience, I can tell you.
Well, did you get to meet royalty at the end of the performance?
I did, yes.
Who was it?
Well, the person that I spoke to most was Princess Alexandra.
Right.
And she's lovely as well. But, I mean, the conversation, they've got it down pat. It's not really... I think they've got their stock phrases.
Yeah.
But it was a wonderful experience. And to play the theatre, the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane, there's such a history to that theatre as well. That was very, very... I felt very special.
Well, who was performing on stage at the same time?
It's interesting you asked me that question because I just found when I was going through a whole lot of CDs the other day, a CD by a lady called Anne Shelton. I wonder if any of your listeners remember Anne Shelton, who was a very big English star, I think probably in the 40s and 50s. You know, to meet some of these people was just amazing. Of course, you know, the more current ones at that time were like the 3 Degrees because Prince Charles liked them, and trying to think who else was on that program. Can't quite remember now, but it was fantastic.
And that would have been televised as well, I guess.
It was, yes.
Yeah, huge audience, probably around the world. Now, you've released a CD called Ditto, which has been very successful, and we've got another track from that coming up. And you're also going to be performing at the Basement at the Gold Coast Arts Centre. That should be a great night.
I'm so looking forward to that. That's, Saturday the 3rd of December. It's going to be just marvellous with Ben Gilgan, John Edwards and Paul Fluffy Jansen. And maybe, you never know who might just be in the audience, who might just happen to have an instrument with them.
And who might that be?
Well, I mean, I don't
special.
even... but just a few of the musicians that I know here, you know, they told me they want to come to the show. I said, well, as long as you bring your instruments.
Mystery special guest.
Mystery special guest, because even I don't know at this stage, but I'll certainly be trying to get them to come and do a song or two with us.
Well, that'll be definitely something to put in the diaries. Maggie, it's been great to talk to you this afternoon, and you must come back again and we'll talk again.
Oh, I'd love to, John. Always. And I've got to tell you, you already know, but 94.1 can be heard all over the world, which is very exciting because I like to hear from my Facebook friends that they've been able to tune in and they love the station, and I love it too. I mean, I have it permanently stuck on 94.1. So thank you very much for the support that you've given to me too.
Well, we all love our music here at Jazz Radio, all the presenters, and I'm sure all our listeners do as well, of course. And great to talk to you again. And you're going to take us to the news now with They Can't Take That Away From Me. It's 3:50.
The way you wear your hat